that really where we need to be if we're going to be functioning democracies is that we as a society and as a civilization must be able to have conversations about, pick a problem, right? We need to be able to have a conversation. And what we have these days, as I've already alluded to, they're not conversations. They turn into screaming matches. And if you don't agree with me, you're an idiot and you're never going to change my mind. And it's not about changing anybody's mind or changing who you are or questioning your values as a human being. It's about us as adults behaving responsibly and recognizing that just because everything you know makes you feel that this is the way to go, guess what? You're one person in a society full of specialists, which means you might know this much, but there is this much that you don't know, that none of us know. I don't know. You don't know. This one person I know and love really has sort of a cynical, like, I don't give a crap, I believe what I'm going to believe, and I don't have the patience to talk to anybody about it. And their spouse is a little frustrated with that because she's somebody who wants to be engaged, wants to have conversations. And she was sort of complaining about him. They were both in part of the conversation, so it's not like she was talking behind his back, but they were both part of the conversation. And she was complaining about sort of his perceived cynicism or his unwillingness to engage, or even sometimes his abrasive and confrontational nature, which for his purpose serves to deflect. Like, listen, if you're not going to understand this about me, I don't even want to talk to you. And I basically defended his way of doing, because I don't think everybody has the patience or the bandwidth or the willingness to engage on these really complicated and difficult topics, especially when a lot of people have just, as we've discussed in the past, these landmines that are everywhere. And so for some people who are like, I don't care about politics, or I don't want to talk about politics, or I don't want to talk to other people about my views, I'm not going to hold that against people, because frankly, it's difficult. It's hard. Even if you're somebody who wants to talk about politics, even if you're somebody who maybe enjoys to a certain degree having a little bit of spirited debate, there are so many poison pills and landmines sprinkled throughout, and pre-packaged worldviews and narratives that you have to struggle against before you can ever have a conversation of meaning, that a lot of people, I'm not going to blame them to be like, man, I don't even want to stick my head in that tangled mess. Like, I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the energy for it. I'm going to go with something I like. And so that's where I kind of, in defense of the cynics and the ones who don't want to participate in politics. But I will say, in my opinion, most of the people I've met in my life who are like, I don't care about politics, the better I get to know them, the more I talk about them, I kind of wish they would. Because the reason they don't want anything to do with politics is because it's kind of toxic and it's fairly unproductive and it's very frustrating. But when you get down into the kind of people they are and the way they live their lives and the way they treat other people, I really wish they had the energy to get their voice out of that conversation, because they tend to be good people. The reason they don't want to talk about politics is because it's so frustrating and toxic and negative. We could use less frustrating, less toxic, and less negative in the world.
And I'm wondering if they could look at it instead of as politics with these teams of right and left, or conservative and liberal, or Democrat, Republican, whatever, and instead just look at it as, what kind of policies do you think, like, A, what do you see as the problems that need fixing, and B, what policies do you think would fix those things? Like, those are the kinds of conversations I would like to be having with people, because everything else is just BS, right?
The whole team dynamic is fundamentally broken from the get-go. And when it comes to people who are not particularly politically engaged or are frustrated with it, that's another reason I kind of don't blame them, because you want to talk about, like, what policies and what policy prescriptions and what do you think would fix this problem or mitigate this issue. even that, I mean, it takes a special kind of nerd to really want to get it. There are a lot of people who claim to really be into politics, but when you really get down to the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of what policy would be good or what policy would be bad and the why, that really gets like wonky and like really technical, and then you really have to, because you're talking about a big ass country with a big ass world with a lot of moving parts, and you've got all these people that get to have their input. And so, you know, for example, when I was living out west, there were people in my community who thought it was a great idea to tear up all the roads and just turn them all into bike lanes and mass transit lanes. And okay, you know, that sounds, for somebody who has that inclination, like a great idea, but then you start getting into the nitty gritty and it's like, okay, well, how do the trucks get to the restaurants to bring the food that you like to eat? Or, you know, how do you get these deliveries accomplished? Because you can't just do it all on bikes and et cetera, et cetera. Things get really complicated. So when it comes to these people who are like, I don't like to talk about politics, I think one, it's the toxicity and the negativity. But on the other side, you know, for people who are just trying to focus on getting the rent paid and getting the kids fed and doing the things that they need to do to keep their normal life going, one of the other conversations we had about how we're a society of specialists. And if somebody's specialty is retail sales or automotive mechanics or whatever it is, right, that the skill sets necessary for them to be and to speak intelligently on politics and public policy and policy prescriptions run into the fact that now they're outside of their depth. And so, you know, again, a lot of the people that I've talked to who are like, I don't care about politics, I don't want anything to do with politics. I think if we could find a way to distill their, well, what do you want? What are you afraid of? Maybe, again, it's problematic. I'm not saying we should turn over our governance to AI, but let's say everybody pours their, what do I want and what am I scared of, into an AI. And out the other end, the AI can sift that through and come out, how about this policy prescription? And then let everybody kind of look at that and say, well, that kind of scares the hell out of me, but this is on the right track, and then try it again. You know, we don't live in that world, so like, there's really not, in my opinion, there's not really a clear, easy, and simple answer to one, how do we get those people engaged, or what policy prescriptions would be best. It's where I'm actually gonna lean on a point that somebody else made, and this is somebody that I really, really recommend people check out. It's a gentleman by the name of Gary Stevenson, but he's a trained economist and was one of the top traders in the world for many years, and then got away from the industry because for a host of reasons. But now he's out here with us trying to spread a message that benefits all of us. And when I say us, I'm not talking about the 1%. But somebody was questioning, he was on a television show, I think on the BBC or something, and somebody was saying, well, what would you do if you were prime minister? What would you do if you were in charge, Mr. Smart Guy? And I kind of loved his take. He actually point blank told the guy that he thought that was really a stupid question and a really juvenile way to look at the world. You know, anybody who has an opinion about something and you say, well, what would you do if you were in charge? That's dumb, because it's operating on the assumption, and this is sort of a bigger problem that global politics has right now, that just some smart person is going to come along and fix everything. You know, we have a guy right now who's running the country who said he's going to fix everything. And, you know, there are quite a few people on both sides of the political spectrum that are seeing that things have not been fixed. And that is nothing against that guy. It is something against the idea that one smart guy or a room full of smart people can solve all of the problems. At the end of the day, that's not how democracy is supposed to work. And this is, again, coming back to Gary Stevenson, he said it was a dumb idea to assume that some smart person can come and solve all of our problems, whether that's dealing with the economy or dealing with anything, climate or mental health issues. That really where we need to be if we're going to be functioning democracies is that we as a society and as a civilization must be able to have conversations about, pick a problem, right? We need to be able to have a conversation. And I'm not, and what we have these days, as I've already alluded to, they're not conversations. They turn into screaming matches. And if you don't agree with me, you're an idiot and you're never going to change my mind. And it's not about changing anybody's mind or changing who you are or questioning your values as a human being. It's about us as adults behaving responsibly and recognizing that just because everything you know makes you feel that this is the way to go, guess what? You're one person in a society full of specialists, which means you might know this much, but there is this much that you don't know, that none of us know. I don't know. You don't know. The people that I work with don't know. The experts who sit in the board of directors room, they don't know. They don't know what it's like to worry about rent or feeding your babies or anything, and I don't know how to engineer a rocket ship, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But when we start having conversations, we need to keep it exactly that. As we alluded to in one of our other conversations, you grew up in one economic demographic. I grew up in a different one. We were only a few miles from our family, but we had different lived experiences. Now you stretch that across the country. Somebody in the deep South whose ancestors were sharecroppers and they basically have lived in poverty for years, or people who live in, say, the Appalachian region, where they were the birthplace or one of the birthplaces of labor unions, where they had to deal with company towns and had a thriving industry, and then it completely left them, and so now they're destitute. And then you've got people who completely grew up in, say, a Portland or a Seattle or an LA, and all they've ever seen is sunshine and great food everywhere and more than enough opportunity than they know what to do with. Or, all these different lived experiences teach us different lessons. And so when I talk about conversations, it's about you or I saying, these are my lived experiences and these are the lessons that I have learned. These are the pitfalls I have seen. Now, let's give the mic to somebody else who's had a very different experience and has different conclusions and different lessons, okay? And because they have had a different set of experiences in their life and have come to a different conclusion than you, it is not an attack on what you experienced. If we're smart and compassionate, we listen to what somebody else has experienced. And then we figure out, well, okay, now our reality, if we're doing it right, our reality just got a little bit bigger. Okay, now there is new information that has come to me. There is a new set of lived experiences. Let's say you're a straight Christian from the Midwest, and now all of a sudden you met a queer Hispanic from the Bay Area, okay? You have no idea what that person's life was like. The climate was different, the job market is different, the attitudes and the viewpoints are different than what you experienced. Now you can reject that, but it doesn't mean it's going away, ever, unless you're ready to commit to bloodshed and violence. And if you are, go away, stop listening. But you've never experienced anything like what they've experienced. And the other side is true, okay? The queer Hispanic from San Francisco has no idea what it's like to grow up in the Rust Belt and watch all of the factory jobs disappear. Watch a region of the country that was once referred to as the Paris of North America turn into blight and abandoned buildings and poverty and a demoralized population because our economic means to care for ourselves and provide better lives for our families have disappeared. These two people I've just described have no idea what the other person has experienced. So it is incumbent upon us, which is just a fancy way of saying it's really important that when you hear about a life experience or a lifestyle that is different than yours, that instead of attacking it or displaying your own lack of confidence and viewing it as an attack upon yourself, that you just sit with it and hear it and go, it never occurred to me that somebody could have that experience. I never thought that people had to deal with that kind of abuse or disrespect, and fold that into how you look at the world. And your world, as well as yourself, just got a little bit bigger. Now, that right there, that is having a good conversation. You're not rejecting somebody else's lifestyle, and you're not changing who you are. You are adding to who you are. That is the end result of us having good conversations and listening to one another. And that, to me, that's like the fundamental starting point. If we're going to fix anything in this country, if we're going to make anything better, we need to recognize not only the things that we have never even considered or thought about before, and we also need to recognize how many things we share in common.
Yes.
Yeah.